A little slow on the trigger on that one, but hello, everybody. I'm sure you've figured it out. We're in Agitation August, so hello.
Hello.
My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction author and an eclectic reader. And gathering around me this month are some wonderful booktubers who are bringing a book with them, or two, if they're extra or indecisive. That agitated them, because we're looking at critical thinking. We're looking at people who have been transformed to change their actions or thoughts based on a particular book. So without any introduction, I'll leave it to Ven to say a little bit about your channel and what you like to read, please.
All right, so I'm knocking things over already. I'm Ven from Ven's Corner. I am a UK-based booktuber, and I'll read anything. I buy books more than I actually read them, if I'm completely honest. Also, to answer the question, extra not indecisive. Might as well take that claim already. I tend to read fantasy, sci-fi, horror as a preference, but I will try and read anything. I've even read The Alchemist, much to my hatred. If Elaine's here already, let's already poke that bear. Because why not? So yeah, I've been on Booktube nearly 3 years now as well. So yeah, and I have 2 books that I'm talking about because extra. The first one, I've just had a special edition arrive, which is Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. And the second one is one that I'm pretty sure everyone will already know. I swear I've got that on the wrong thing, which is 1984. So, or 2025, if you want to look at it another way.
Yes.
So, there we go.
So because people have talked about this a lot, and it's probably more well-known, we'll probably go into more detail about Hell Followed With Us, both because it's interesting and new, and because Ven has a really pretty copy to show off.
I do. Pretty copy, pretty internal art, slightly horrific internal art, but very pretty.
Well, so I had some horrific art in the graphic novel version of 1984, so...
Yeah, I can see why. I know 1984 is relatively banned in parts of the US, from what I understand. I can kind of understand why you might not want the graphic novel in schools a little bit more than the physical book.
Well, I mean, there's sex and violence and psycho torture kind of stuff. So
yeah, the torture I'd forgotten about.
Yeah,
which is a really worrying thing to say out loud. But there we go.
All right. So I'm going to ask you about why you chose Hell Followed With Us as a book that shook you up. So go ahead and we'll say hi to some of the chat.
So 1984, no, Hell Followed With Us. I found it completely by accident. I don't know what I'd read, but it triggered me onto it. It was a cover by, like, so this is the original cover, just so people can see. So you can get the religious undertones that's going to be in this straight away. And it's a YA book. I did not expect it to be as violent or as gruesome or as on the edge, especially with body horror, as it actually was. On a reread, it didn't bother me as much. But I knew going... I've read worse since as well, which might have something to do with it. But the very start of the book, you have your main character who's called Benji, who's transgender, running for his life. His dad's just been shot through the head. He's got bits of his dad literally in his mouth at this point. And he's been hunted by a religious sect of angels or a death squad to take him back to the church to perform his divine duty, for want of a better word. And I have never had a book, and still haven't to this point, that has triggered every one of my protective instincts so instantly like that did. I had to put it down and reread it. And even on the reread this time round, it still got me straight away so angry, because I have a massive thing. I do not like punching down. I do not like people being victimized. I do not like people being abused. Nobody should. Unfortunately, we live in the current world and it's ignored a lot of the time. Right. And that straight away sort of pulled me and made me so angry. And the first read through I did of this book was one of those where I'd read a chapter, I'd have to put it down to process, and then pick it up again, another chapter, and down and up and down. And it got darker the further in you went. Like, it started off pitch black and just somehow got worse the more it went through. And it really sort of started to drive home how far potentially we could end up going with some of the things we're seeing now. Because you've got a religious fundamentalist group. There are things that are now on the rise right now in many areas of the world. In fact, let's rephrase that. Fundamentalism in general, not just religious, ideological fundamentalism is very, very, very much beginning to hit the ascendancy in some areas. You do have a lot of weaponization of hate for certain groups as well, just or fear, which I know that came up yesterday when you were talking to Melinda as well, the weaponization of fear to weaponize certain groups. And I'm looking at it going, we're not at this point, but at the minute you can put but at a comment like that, there's a problem.
Right.
So, yeah. And I've not seen a huge amount of people talk about it as well. It is getting an animated series, though, just on a side point, I believe.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty popular, like, trending book right now, and a lot of people are now aware of the author. How Followed with This was his debut book. But
yes.
He's got 3 now?
He's got 3. I do. The other 2 behind me. So you've got Spirit Bears Its Teeth, which is a Victorian horror. And then you have Compound Fracture, which came out last year, which is set in Appalachia, just after the first Trump administration came in. And some of the issues were, it's
right in there.
Yeah. And then they have another one that's out next month, which is their first adult horror, which I am terrified to read, to be completely honest. Because what he hits, like Hell Followed with Us, is the most gruesome of the 3 in many regards. But yeah. So
So hello everyone with that introduction of bloody and gruesome. Leslie's here listening at work. Love you too. Pat is here from Book Chat with Pat. Hello. Jaleesa is here. Hello.
Jaleesa. How many tabs, Jaleesa? I need to know.
Diane saying hello. Gareth saying hello.
So many amazing people.
What I said already, Eva, but nice to see you. Joseph has fix the banner. Okay, thank you. Greg is here. Hello. Elaine is here. Did she hear your poke the bear comment? I don't know.
Probably not. But all day she's been at me to reread that wall mountable canvas of a book. So again.
Yeah. Eva says we're not at that point, but like Miley Cyrus saying, it's about the climb. I don't know the song, but I'll take your word for it. Or in this case, the plummet. Oh, nice metaphor. Nice.
Yeah. Which actually, the plummet is a good choice of words because, and again, you mentioned it, I think it was yesterday when you were talking to Melinda, but we need to remember how far we have come in the last 150 years. Like, in a lot of ways, we are so much further.
That was Gareth. Yeah, 300 years.
The drawback is when you're climbing a hill or a mountain, it's a lot easier to fall backwards down towards the earth than climb up. It doesn't take much to push you back. And we're kind of feeling a bit at that point right now. Which is a bit soul destroying, to be honest. Yeah.
So we're coping in our separate ways, but Diane brings up a good point. Not sure I'll be reading that one. So you said it triggered your protective instincts and you don't like to see people victimized, but you do read a lot of horror. So how do you separate? Are you torn apart every horror you read? Because I don't know, maybe behind the scenes.
Bizarrely, horror in general doesn't bother me when it's read. I don't watch horror. Because when I watch it, I suffer a lot worse with it. I don't do jump scares well. Reading horror, generally speaking, doesn't bother me. But I think, who was it? There was an author who was talking about, they were getting a bit of criticism. Why do you write horror? That's not proper literature. You know, like people do sometimes for no good reason. And they turned around and said, look, because of where we are as a society now, a lot of the sort of threats that we used to have to ourselves are gone or reduced compared to what they used to be. So we've lost a lot of that instinctiveness, and horror is kind of a way for us to safely explore those boundaries. And a lot of horror for me hits the flight or fight response rather than fawn or freeze. Body horror is a bit different in that it preys on insecurity rather than survival, and also curiosity a little bit. There's that, for me at least. And I spoke to a friend of mine about this because they're really into body horror, and I double checked with them. They said they're all right for me to fetch this up beforehand, but they're transgender and they love body horror. And it's like, is part of the reason you like body horror so much because of that you're transgender, because of like all that? And they stopped and went, you know what? Yeah, it's because it feeds into that sort of dysmorphia aspects a lot of the time. But also there's that human curiosity of what's that? Let's poke it. Let's see what it does first a lot of the time. That body horror kind of does tap into. It's almost like you're reading a car crash sometimes. And you should look away. You really should. But you kind of can't because there's that human fascination with it. And it overrides.
Some of us.
Yeah. So it's, and I don't like body horror. It's like, I have read extreme horror. I don't do very well with it, so I don't read it particularly often.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, I don't read as much. I didn't read horror before I started Booktube as well. Interestingly enough, I never read horror before Booktube.
Oh, okay.
So, just on a side point,
I tried to read The Only Good Indians, and Stephen Graham Jones is a very popular horror writer right now, Indigenous horror writer. And there was a scene where there's like an unusual graphic, painful violence, right? Yeah. And to do, well, I don't have to explain because I don't want to give you an image. Yeah. But it was like there was lots of other things that had been thrown out that I was like skating over, and then I got to this, and I was just like, I don't want to look at that. Like it's the car crash, or it's the thing that I don't want to look at, and so I was like, I can't. So
yeah, there's a few. The books because I don't DNF. The books that I have DNF'd have all been horror. And quite often they've been body horror. And there is a limit. And I kind of go into a lot of horror now going, I know what to expect. So I kind of insulate myself from it a little bit mentally. But because this was YA, I did not expect. And I think that speaks to the current issue we kind of have with lack of age characterization with books at the moment. Because I know when I used to work for WH Smith's years ago, and when I worked there, you had like your age ratings, then you had teen, then you had YA, and teen has got folded into YA now, and it over here, so you don't really have that separation now, and it's real. And I've got 3 kids, ranging from 10 to 21, and it's really hard because the middle one's 15 now, 15, 16 in a couple of months, and they're getting into reading, and they're can I read this romance book? Like, you are not reading Horns Give Adeline. Not a chance are we going down that route just yet. We'll have a talk about why. When you're 18, fine.
I've never heard of that one, so I don't know.
Yeah, you don't want to.
I'm gonna go there. We do have a request for some definitions, and so we'll skip to one of the questions that I had about how central is body horror to Hell Followed With Us, and how do you understand... Sorry, how central is body dysmorphia to body horror? And then maybe help us define those terms for folks.
All right. So I did actually write down the definition of body dysmorphia from the NHS website, just so I had it to hand. So body dysmorphia is a feeling of insecurity or unease towards a physical characteristic that has little to no observable difference to you from somebody else. So it's generally something that you'll feel insecure about, but other people won't. And at every point in anyone's life, you will have a moment of feeling insecure in image, especially now with how we're constantly bombarded with online imagery and the internet and told how we should look and how we should act. So like younger people, like my kids, I don't know how they cope sometimes, a lot of the time, because it's just bam, 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 bam all the time. And it's so hard to kind of regulate that because social media platforms don't do a good job.
Right.
Who knew?
So, who's that?
Yeah. In terms of in body this horror book, so Benji, who is our main character, suffers body dysmorphia, but not gender dysphoria, which is important to separate those two out. It's said earlier on, no issue with their physical characteristics as in general, in terms of their gender, but physically there's some things there. And because of basically they are infected with a specific virus that is destroying their body from the inside out. So you have these moments in here where Benji goes to do certain things and the body literally starts to rot off and fall away, and you see like fangs starting to protrude, and it's described in the story as he slowly but surely is disintegrating and turning into a seraphim, or as he calls it, a monster. He is an instrument of God, according to the cult that have infected him and his own mother. So you have two different sides where you already have a character who already felt quite insecure in their own body because of the sort of society that they were growing up in. You know, it was very evangelical, constant dead naming, not recognizing who they were, all sorts of stuff like that. And then is literally slowly disintegrating into a puddle of muscle-bound goo, basically, which there is a picture. So
can I put up a warning banner?
So yeah. So this is the artwork at the back of the book showing him after he's transformed. That's what he ends up as at the end of the book. As he slowly but surely sort of literally does disintegrate, especially as he starts to, because of everything that he's goes through, he's just seen his dad get murdered in front of him. So you've got a character who is feeling so vengeful as well. And a whole thing throughout, I will be good, I will make them suffer, which is very Old Testament in a lot of ways as well, against the people that have done him wrong.
Yeah, we're getting a little far away from the definition of body horror and the centrality. So I just want to like bring it back a little bit and help for those who are asking about spoilers in the chat. So I will put up a banner if we're going to say spoilers.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those were, because it starts out with the father being murdered. But the premise at the beginning, the just before the story opens, is this apocalyptic event where there's this virus unleashed, and the main character Benji is trying to escape the religious cult that is trying to finish off any survivors that are not in their group after this apocalyptic event. And yeah, there's a lot of body horror things, as Elaine said. Thanks while I'm eating, then.
Sorry, Elaine.
Yeah, you also had an answer, 311 tabs. I wish I knew how to look that up. It's very impressive. Eva said they put us on escalators for 299 of those 300 years. I think that just is referring to the point where we're going up and down instead of like actually rising.
Yeah, it's depressing how often we slip, we forget
done with
things that we learned 100 years ago and how we always repeat it. It's just depressing sometimes.
And then Greg said, what do you think about being open to spoilers before reading a horror book or knowing the substance of the book before the cover is cracked? I mean, sort of outside of this discussion, but I like to know what a book is about generally before I dive into it, because there's certain tropes I don't like. And, you know, sometimes opening up to a random page is not enough to tell me that I'm not going to like it.
So I very rarely read the blurb on stuff because I cover buy. And this was an example of that. I just pretty cover me buy. Spoilers don't bother me as much in general anyway. And again, I've been judged for this a few times, but I will read the first page, a middle page, and the last page of any book that I pick up in a bookshop just to get an idea. And as I'm reading through, sometimes if I'm struggling with a book, I will go online and find spoilers for the book, so I can try and figure out where it's going and try and spot foreshadowing. So I'm more interested in how the journey works out in general. Plot is quite often the least important thing to me in a book, bizarre though that sounds, as long as the character moments make sense and work. And I'm a sucker for world building as well, which this does have as well. So
it felt very familiar. It felt very grounded in, I don't know, someplace in Pennsylvania that seemed like, oh, I've been to that area. I've driven through there.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, that's it. Because when I read Compound Fracture, I had a bit of a disconnect with that because it felt, because it's relatively recent, it's like the world isn't like this, surely. And that's like because I'm in the UK.
Yeah.
And then this is very much like the hollows in West Virginia, you know, these sort of old mining towns that are literally dying at this point. And then I watched a documentary afterwards and it clicked. And it's like, oh, that is what that's like, because we don't quite have the same things here. Because sense of scale more than anything else, the UK is very small. So whereas that, it's very easy to see a lot of the stuff in here playing out in the UK at the moment. So
Okay, so that leads me to my next general question before spoilers, because we are going to have to get into them for a little bit. What parallels are you drawing with current society? So, without spoilers, we've got a religious cult, we've got an apocalyptic pestilence event. Yeah. Oh, and what I wanted to say is the title comes from Revelations, and I actually looked it up. So, I don't remember anything about the 7 seals, but I do know about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And apparently when the seals are broken in Revelations, there's this 4 horsemen, and the 4th horseman rides on a pale horse. It is death, and hell follows with him. So that's what it comes from. And I was like, oh, okay. So
and there's a lot of biblical quotes in here, especially from Revelation.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few in there, which a few I looked up because I was reading it going, are these actual biblical quotes or are these revisionist from the point of view of this new cult? And doing a little bit of research, not everybody recognizes the book of Revelation that's Christian because it's so different to the rest of it, which I wouldn't know that because not remotely religious. But so there's 2 things that kind of themes in here that really stand out. The first one is one that we're seeing a lot in the UK, and from what I'm seeing in the news, a lot in the US, which is the demonization specifically of LGBTQ plus people. Specifically, that's what this book focused on more than anything else. And you have the situation in the US where, for example, I believe trans people aren't allowed to serve the armed forces anymore because that's a sensible idea. There's been removals from like the Stonewall Memorial as well. Here in the UK, there was a whole kerfuffle not that long ago around a load of stuff to do with trans rights. There was recently a medical report, I can't remember the name of it, that wasn't particularly great. Let's put it that way. It's very complicated to go into because it's very medically focused. And you have certain sections of the media, quite often right-wing, not always, but quite often right-wing, demonizing this very, very small group that is less than 1% of the population and going, all the problems, it's their fault. Because it's a little bit harder to punch against some of the other groups now because they're acceptable now. To use the right-wing term, they should be acceptable anyway.
Well, even with numbers, maybe if you're trying to demonize immigrants, well, there's like, 25, 30%. So that's not, they've got voting power. They've got a block. Like they're not as helpless or marginalized and easy to down. And
it's that weaponization of the fear of other again for very little good reason. And it's very easy for them to then pull the statistics out that go, well, this percentage do this. It's like, yes, but it's a percentage of 1%. It's not going to be, it's not that much really when you really look at everything else. Every group has bad eggs in it. Every group. But they only report on certain ones. So you have that side of it as well. The other thing as well, which is a lot more subtle, I didn't pick up on it straight away, is and this happens all the time, I know, but you've got a bit of a generational disconnect there as well. Because our sort of the side of Benji and the people that Benji fought in with, who are overwhelmingly LGBTQ plus, they exist in an old LGBTQ center in, I think it's Akron, which I think is a made up place. I don't know US geography, but they're all like 21 or under. And then you look at all the other groups that they interact with in the world, and there is a bit of a difference in age there. So without going into any real detail on that, well, I'm
going to ask a question that's diving into it. So go ahead if you want. I'm going to put up the banner.
Yeah. So there's 3 groups in this world. There's the group that's in the LGBTQ center, which is Benji's group. You have the angels, who are the evangelical Christians who have blamed everything on sinners, ranging from overpopulation to climate change to everything else. And then you have another group called the Vanguard, which was one of your questions.
Yes.
So
the if you don't want to hear these, you can just mute until I move the banner away. But the Vanguard group are basically what we would consider doomsday preppers. They're older, they're married, they're not evangelical cult members, they're not LGBTQ caught in the youth center and banded together after the event members. So they're older, they've amassed weapons and preserved food. And so what they do is they trade some of those food items, clothing items, things that the kids aren't able to scrounge up. And in return, the kids return proof that they've killed some of the cult members, right?
yeah.
So they're acting as their like paid militia, paid army, basically. They're putting kids on the front lines instead of using all their weapons and putting their own lives at risk.
Yeah.
And that's the deal. And it's negotiated very touchily, very like
There's definitely an imbalance there in terms of how negotiations go. Because at the end of the day, just like now, but in a different way, one group of people has all the resources. So what essentially ends up happening is this situation where they're going, well, we've got all this nice stuff and we don't want to get shot.
right.
But you go and do the dirty work. It's a bit like how quite often in times of like conflict, the first people who get called up for military service are the young, right?
Mm-hmm.
You send the young people out because, awful though it sounds, more headstrong a lot of the time, don't know as much of the way as the world. They're a bit more blinkered, and they still have that sort of headstrong energy, which as you get older, and your time begins to tick away,
you're more cautious.
You're more, and that's kind of what happens here, where you have this group that realistically is really well equipped, and it's like, no, we'll give you this much. Oh, well, we said we'd give you this much, but no, we're going to give you less. And it's creating that sense of desperation then in this other group. But like the Vanguard are overwhelmingly like 40 plus, I would say, from the way they're described.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, you need help. Well, what have you got to give us?
Right.
Constantly. And there's no middle ground there.
Versus your group, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously you have the angels on the other side who are just absolute nut jobs. So there's no other way of putting that, to be honest.
Let's stay with the Vanguard for a second. So one of the echoes that called up for me is the professional armed services in the U.S. Yeah. I feel like it's not a draft, so it's not from all echelons of society. It's often the people who have fewer choices, and that is a steady job where they get skills and they get a good retirement fund, all that sort of stuff for money for education. And in the olden days, where people could pay a substitute to go fight for them, that's exactly what it echoes for me. So in terms of like a fighting force that you pay for so that you can sit fat and sassy behind the enemy lines, not behind the enemy lines, behind the front lines, I suppose, is what it called up. But was there anyone else that it was calling out for you that the author might have been pointing to?
So the obvious one is, because of the main protagonist of the group is evangelical church, evangelical belief specifically. Not religion in general, because actually there's a number of points in here where the persecuted group are actually shown to be, some of them are religious, and it's shown they do pray, they still venerate God. And Benji themselves, despite everything that they've gone through, still maintains a little bit of faith in there. Very little, understandably. But it's that poke at the extreme ideals, and then how, if you follow like this blind faith without fact, which is what is happening with this group, and it's what we're seeing more and more now in modern politics as it slides to one side. You have this sort of what's the best way of putting it? My brain's just gone a little bit. Bear with me. You have this where you blame the different for all the problems in the world. So a big example with that is the entire church, and this is not made totally clear. It's just like a little typo at the end. Everybody's white. Everybody's white. It's all one group, one demographic of people saying everybody else is a sinner. Anyone who's different is what's called. This is God's judgment with that blind belief. And it's that following a belief without having the evidence to back it up. So blind faith, for want of a better word. And it's almost like a cult in many regards. And again, we're seeing this more and more in politics. I've seen it more from what I can see in the US right now, but there's plenty of it everywhere else in the world where, okay, people aren't happy with politicians, understandably. So someone else comes up and goes, we'll break the system. And then they weaponize that sort of anger at the system to break it, but they're breaking it for their own way.
Right.
And no one's going to see better off, which
it's
links into 1984.
Say again?
Links into 1984 in a lot of ways, that as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's like the public has a fire hose of anger that's aimed at the politicians, and the politicians give as a possible solution, well, let me put this valve on the fire hose and aim it over at that group.
Yeah.
That's not a solution.
No,
Yeah.
It's not. And kind of the other thing is it kind of looks at this, doesn't look at it as directly, but like, what is the job of a politician really? Is it to govern on behalf of the people or execute the will of the people? And when that breaks down, you end up with situations where you end up with this populism, this sort of extreme ideology, because everyone gets so annoyed at everything that's going on that they'll listen to any old rubbish at a certain point, because people get desperate, people get afraid. It's very easy to sort of militarize that in many ways. And that's why right now we have this situation where politics has become so militant, where it stops being a conversation now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a conversation with weapons, which is not a very
it's stopped being a conversation. Now it's an argument. Whereas there used to be, you'd move towards, like, in theory at least, sometimes you'd have compromise. Now it's gone so far one way, other side is beginning to slip the other way just to sort of counterbalance it, and that's just as dangerous as well. Like Gavin Newsom, who is the Californian governor, probably the perfect person to deal with Trump right now. I don't like his political record at all with some of the stuff he's done in California, to be honest, what I've seen. And sometimes, again, it's this militarization, which you then see here, because it fragments everybody out into nice, easy little stereotype groups that you can then target. And that's kind of what this book really does lean into a lot about. It's this breaking down of society into little subsections to just get rid of because they're inconvenient or different, or you don't like them for whatever reason that is. So,
and I would say, okay, so besides the little echo that I felt about the armed services, the more bigger arrow, I would say, is the complacent middle, who are afraid of the shrinking status, perhaps, but also comfortable and not as desperate, and so they're using their power in a bad way.
Apathy is a terrible thing for a large group of people to have.
Apathy, it's a lack of empathy for sure, because they were like, what are you going to give us, like you said, but also I think the complacency, like our stronghold is never going to be broken into. It's like, really? You think so?
Well, Gary Stevens, who I know we spoke about him elsewhere, The Economist, was talking recently about how that the cycle sort of goes. The people who always lose out are the people at the bottom of the pile, because what eventually happens is the middle class replace the higher class, and it kind of flips over time because they weaponize it. They weaponize one group against everybody else with the promise of, we'll make things better. Never gets better for the group that gets weaponized, because the status quo just flips between the top two. So, and how we haven't changed this yet is just baffling to me. Like, it really is.
Elaine was asking if there are any animals that are harmed, and I can't remember if there are dogs.
No, there's.
I don't remember any pets being mentioned.
There's there's some hunting for food, which makes sense in the setting. But other than that, I mean, even then, it's only just sort of skimmed over as they've no food yet. They found a squirrel. That's it, though.
All right. So Diane says, interesting. I did watch a little bit of an author interview about the book. I'm just curious if A.J. White was raised in a highly religious family or not.
I'm not sure if he was raised in a religious family. I know he is Appalachian. So he is from like those hollows. So I suspect there was a lot of religious pressure in general. I know his foreword for the book commented on, this is a book written by an angry young man who is angry at the world. And if this isn't for you, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's because it is rough. It's a rough read at times.
Elaine says, gee, where have we seen that in history before? People who haven't learned from the past. Yeah. Grace popping in. Hello. Elaine says, why I don't respect politicians. They send others to do the fighting, but they are nowhere near the conflict. Grace says, oh, yes, good point about how things can get so reactionary when people are already feeling strained so much by the day-to-day.
Yeah. And we're seeing it in the UK now. We've just had Manchester Pride, because we do it quite late in the year in Manchester, but
it's moved, migrated. Yeah.
It takes quite a lot of time, and Manchester's like the biggest one outside of London and Brighton, I think.
Okay.
But Liverpool cancelled their Pride event because of lack of funding, and a number of local councils are now run by a very right-wing party that is actually a private company legally. So I'm sure that can't go wrong.
That reform?
Yes, it is. Okay. And they've taken down pride flags. They've thrown out a bit like what's happened in the US in a lot of ways, thrown out diversity rules, cut funding for this. The one I saw the other day, that was in the US. That wasn't here. So ignore what I was about to say. I was going to refer to something, but it's not here. And yeah, we're seeing that now in 2025. And these are outlets for people to feel safe and sort of accepted and welcomed in a way they sometimes can't be. And all this is getting cut.
Yeah.
All in the name of ideology. And it sucks.
A thinly disguised ideology to get power, I think.
Yeah. Although I do think with a lot of them, I think they do believe this as well, which is a bit worrying.
Which leads me to my next question, and then we'll try to wrap up Hell Followed and switch a little bit over to 1984. What do you consider a cult, and what are the dangers? Because I know there's like people who believe a thing that they can't prove and have faith in that thing, and they're a community together, and they don't harm people. And then there's the cult, which we got into this a little bit when we were talking about Tradwife comment. I don't know if you were there. Content. I don't know if you were there for that discussion, but it's like conditioning and training that really harms the chances of the individuals so that they don't. Yeah, they can't operate in society as a whole. So what do you think?
So a cult in itself is not intrinsically a bad thing. It comes from, it can also mean sect. It comes from Roman language.
Okay.
But it has negative connotations because when it goes wrong, they're the ones you see.
Yeah. Headlines.
So, because like the term cult is used to refer to like a cult following of something, like a film or a book, something that's small. It can just be a group of people that are really enthusiastic about this. The problem comes is when the cult follows. Again, it's that idea of following a belief without evidence that it works. So, if you want to be really controversial, Christianity at one point would be considered a cult, but it's hit that point where it's been around that long and it's got that big and it's cross borders like all religions have, that it's been given a sense of legitimacy by ruling governments over time. And again, you have sects within that, and it always comes down to, I believe this thing regardless of what the facts tell me. It's like, and again, it falls into 1984 a little bit as well, where if it starts to get its hooks in and you start teaching that this is the way things are and other things are wrong, and you convince people to not look for the evidence, that's when you start having a problem. Because the minute people stop thinking, which is what agitation orchestra is all about, it's about looking and thinking about what's going on and critically evaluating it. If you can stop people doing that, you've won that battle with them, unfortunately. And there's lots of different ways that can work.
Yeah.
Education is kind of the big one.
Right.
For me. Yeah, there was a US YouTuber that was talking about, well, they live in the UK now, but they're talking about the idea of cults and US versus UK. And that was really interesting because they were talking about the Pledge of Allegiance in schools. Try to do that in the UK, there'd be a riot. It's like, that would not happen. Right now, everyone's kicking off because people are raising St. George's flag around the country. Because some people...
flags are symbols and they have meaning for different populations, and sometimes that's inflammatory and an incite to rebellion. Sometimes it's not. Yeah,
and right now you've got the thing is, this is nationalism. This is being proud of being English. So everyone else is going, well, is it though? Because we don't have that level of national pride. And again, it's that sort of indoctrination of we are the best and we are right. And I don't know enough about the US school system. Or lack of, as it appears from looking outside sometimes.
I will tell you, we all grew up saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, but no one has the level of love of the flag that the current president does.
Okay.
I mean, I should just speak for myself. That's true. I know other people who have a much more reverent and sacred sort of attitude towards the flag as a symbol of something that they stand by and will fight for.
Yeah.
But yeah, when certain things start to be, in essence, a dog whistle, I think they need to be regulated more or talked about more, or, you know, like in some way taken out of that.
Yeah. And the problem you then have right now, and again, we've seen it here right now as well, is it cannot be a conversation because everyone's been separated into groups. Argument. So conversation can't happen because everybody has to be right and there's no middle ground. And sometimes, you know, people are sometimes wrong as well. And sometimes it's a fight that has to happen. So,
okay, I'm reading another book that's called How Trust Works, and it just got into the part about the in-group and the out-group and trusting what is reinforced by your in-group and not trusting the out-group, and this whole thing about like who's right, and you can't discuss things rationally anymore because it wasn't because you're invested. They had some interesting like sociological and neuroscience like kind of things. So yeah, I'm not done with it. So I need to let it settle, but it has some really good ideas for this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the whole thing as well is like, because you find your own kind of tribe as well over time. You do have like a little bit of confirmation bias potentially going on a lot of the time as well. When you look for information, you're more likely to look for information that proves your point of view a lot of the time as well, rather than
regard it as accurate.
And also the other thing is, 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for answers, you're using the internet, whose algorithm is tailored to what you've already looked for. So it's more likely to feed you the answers that you kind of are hoping for rather than are necessarily accurate sometimes as well.
You got to be aware of that. Yeah, Elaine says it's revolting to talk about billions for the military and borders, but zero money for social services. I read a book earlier this month, and the thesis is that the U.S. is a cult because of the way we have developed our American dream over time and the lack of connection to reality. Interesting take. That is interesting. Think about that one. Elaine, at least here, there's been a huge increase in support for addiction opioid, especially. Sorry, I feel like it's out there, but the more at county and local levels, if that helps ease your mind. Yeah.
That's the other thing, is where it's really hard to look at the US as someone in the UK because it's just so big and the state stuff varies so much between states.
Right.
It's baffling because I know there is massive differences between one state and another. So that's the other thing. So it's almost like the country's too big and too diverse to ever actually be able to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, in many ways.
That's the dream. That's the dream. Yep. Sorry for the
the drills are going.
Final question for Hell Followed with us is it depressing to read, or is there hope in this novel? And if so, where would the hope be found?
The hope comes from like the found family aspect. You know, by the end of it, Benji is accepted by the group despite what he literally becomes at the end, but they take him in as the person that he is. and accept him for being that person. And I think that's like the biggest thing, because quite often these things start with when we stop seeing a person and just start seeing a number, right? So there is, at the end of the day, the good guys win, inverted commas, as best they do, at least in this little pocket of the world. There's a cost to it. Not everyone makes out in one piece or alive, but you still have these individual bonds that are built that are almost familial, but they're chosen bonds, right? And it also shows that even like the smallest sort of little bit of, I was going to say insurrection, that's the wrong word. I can't think what the word is. Going against the main.
Rebellion.
Yeah, defiance, that's a good one. The smallest little bit of defiance can still make a difference, even when sometimes it feels like it's an impossible thing, which I know a lot of people struggle with right now, because it feels like everything is going on constantly, and it's like, where's the hope? But the smallest thing can just ignite something that actually fetches the change that people want. You just kind of have to, awful that sounds, tough it out and stick to your guns, for want of a violent word. But it kind of is sometimes.
Yeah. I think I'm going to mess up the phrase, but there's something about a one small step or contribution is not going to save the world, but you can't save the world without those small steps and contributions.
Well, no, if you only ever look at the big picture, you're building a house of cards that will fall down. At the end of the day, you need those small individual moments to build up, because if you build it without foundations, 50 years, you're back at the same point. A lot of the time.
So yeah, you need both. You need capacity at both levels, both like organizing and individual. Okay. 1984, to switch gears a little bit. We're still in apocalypse. We're still bad, sort of. Well, there's more of a government, I think, in 1984.
Yeah, so 1984 is interesting because you could argue it has the same cult mentality. It's definitely fundamentalist in the same way that the religious group is in Hell Followed With Us. Just it's a political fundamentalism rather than a religious one, but just as dangerous. So, and yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot in 1984 that you look at. When I first listened to this, it was I did the audio book, and the audio narrator generally narrates non-fiction. So I felt like I was listening to a documentary.
Scary.
Which did not help matters when I listened to it the first time around. It's like, hang on a minute, is this fiction? What's going on? Because you have like the themes of, I mean, the thing that's really understated in the book is the split between the levels. Like 85% are the proles, the uneducated, the ones that they again talk about weaponizing, and they talk about that very clearly in the book. And you have like the top 5%, and then the sort of group in the middle, the party members. And the way that information is used as control, surveillance, fear. The surveillance one actually is very, very on the nose right now, because there's been, here in the UK, they've just introduced online safety bill. Only came in about 6 weeks ago. And
the age.
Yeah, and in theory, if I believe the theory behind it, which I don't, but if I believe the theory behind it to stop young people seeing material that they shouldn't, great.
Fine.
If it worked, brilliant. What it doesn't help is where it stops people who are mentally ill and have really poor thoughts going to a website, they're underage, to try and get help, and that website designed to help people in those conditions, young people, they can't get on because that becomes age gated, which has happened, which is the unintended consequences, which is another wonderful thing of government being behind the curve on stuff, which it always is on technology. That's why certain corporations do so well exploiting it. But the surveillance thing as well, because again, we do see it from governments. We see it more from private companies at the moment.
So the 1%, if you will. I don't remember. You said 5% was like the inner.
I think it was. It might be less. It might only be 2%, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to fudge the numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
So the society is not very balanced. You've got a very what is it? A very fat pyramid, I would say, because it's
Yeah.
a wide base and tiny, tiny point. So not balanced. So what is your word, Ven? Because it's sort of the opposite.
So my word is equilibration. And this is my whole thing, generally speaking, is I like to try and talk about balance as much as possible. Try to. Balance is a thing that is not static. It doesn't stay in one place. And equilibration is the process of finding that balance so that everything else can sort of actually work together properly in a thing. And then, and then constantly sort of adjust it as needs fit, because, you know, the world changes. Circumstances changes. You can't stay in one place because everything goes wrong. And that's something that people kind of, when they talk about balance, they forget a little bit that it's not a static point. So, yeah.
7 bingos with your word. So well done. You guys are playing bingo. You can look in the description to find the bingo cards. And if you want to binge all of the interviews so far, this is the last week and lots of bingos to choose from. So you just got to send to me the proof that you listened and you got the names assigned to the words. I had 2 quotes from 1984 that I thought were pretty interesting. One was from chapter 9 after... no, it's from the book. It's from the boring part with they just explained the book. The earthly paradise had been discredited at exactly the moment it became realizable. Do you recognize what that means, or do I have to contextualize it a little bit? Because it's randomly out of the whole book, but basically they're talking about the machine economy and how if you industrialize to a certain point, you should be able to have so much more leisure. But instead of seeing that paradise come to fruition, it was like, oh no, we can't let that happen. We have to like make this secret cabal.
And
so people working.
Yeah, it's the idea of the minute you give people free time, they might notice how unequal society is in a lot of ways. Because the easiest way to keep a large group of people in one place is to keep them busy and tired. Awful though that sounds.
Phones all the time?
Yeah.
We're going to 3 different jobs? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, how many people now need a second job just to make rent?
Yeah.
But rent housing is a human right. This is something that's seen throughout the world. You have a human right to live in safe accommodation. Why can't people afford it if that's a human right?
Yeah.
Wild thought, I know.
So many layers and ideas, some of which are happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah, scary how much 1984 related to 2024, says Elaine. Yeah, agree about the layers. Busy, tired, confused, and suspicious.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah.
And then because other people have the time to weaponize that suspicion, they can deflect the attention away. Villainize other people, which again links back to Hell Followed With Us. The interesting thing about 1984 is I don't think 1984 is the way we're going to go if we hit a dystopia, because that is government in control.
Right. At least in the US.
Yeah. I think we'll hit more towards a more cyberpunk sort of dystopia where the world is run by corporations. I think that's where we're going, unfortunately.
We're there, yeah.
I don't like either of those options.
Yeah. Here's the last quote is about how they're going to keep the power, which I thought was interesting. So people wrongly assumed that what is not hereditary cannot be permanent. So I think like thinking about Orwell, thinking about royalty or the families, whatever. It's not about hereditary. The party is not concerned with perpetuating its blood, but with perpetuating itself, its worldview, its way of life. A ruling group nominates its successors. That's how they stay a ruling group. And the hierarchical structure remains the same. And I wanted to point to the hierarchy part because that's the big fat pyramid. That's exactly what Octavia Butler talks about in her books, the hierarchy thing that we're obsessed with.
I know, I can't remember, it might have been Gareth's talking about like the upper class here in the UK, where there is, for some people, a level of class guilt, right? For whatever. So they do all this philanthropic work, which is good optics for them, but does actually help people a little bit. If you want to perpetuate that power scheme, those people are the most dangerous because they'll undermine you. So if you take away the hereditary aspects of that, and then you through the education system, which you see because the rewriting of history in 1984 as well, you create kind of this vacuum that pulls people upwards into it and spits the people out that don't fit. And it's it's actually really scary. And it's something that we have seen before in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Specifically most recently. So, and yeah, Reform is doing the exact same thing. I know there's been a press conference today by the idiot leader of that party talking about immigration and mass deportation, which I have not looked at yet because
who is the leader of the party? I think
Nigel Farage. He is friends with
Farage. Okay. I thought
yeah.
Who's UKIP? Who am I associating with?
He used to be UKIP.
Okay, that's why.
All yeah, he UKIP sort of fell apart, and then he started a new one.
Newspeak. Just call it Reform because we want to maintain the structures as they are.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Well, that's not what the name says. Reform is stability, right? Because it's staying the same.
Right.
Double speak.
Yeah. It wasn't that Newspeak, but yeah, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. All you got to do is call something its opposite, and people are like, wait, what? And then they can't, right? Yeah. Yeah,
and the control of language as well, which we're seeing online more and more right now.
Do you know anything about the Sacklers? That was one of the examples in the disinformation book Melinda talked about.
I don't.
So they're the people behind the opioid epidemic that stashed all their money offshore. So when they were sued and they went bankrupt, they were able to keep it instead of actually paying out for all the people they hurt. Reform is being used as a name because it gives the impression that the country needs to be taken back, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, it does need to be taken back, but from the people who are in power right now, which is not.
Which Farage used to be a Conservative MP. Yeah. Leopard doesn't change its spots that much.
Right. So. Speaking of leopards, do you have that lovely jingle over in your meme land in the UK? Because I would love for some of the people that are perpetuating these myths and demonizing these populations to have the leopard eat their face. Have you heard that one?
No, I've not heard. I don't see much in it.
Leopard would eat my face. Oh, it's like a little gospel tune. Francesca, I can't remember. She's a wonderful black lady. She sings this song and she made it up, and it's so good. It's so of the moment.
Oh no, I haven't heard that one.
All right, I'll send it to you. Any final questions from anybody? I'm just going to take the last couple of minutes to solicit questions. Remind everyone, there's a whole playlist. This is the last week for Agitation August, and we might need like a little breather. Tomorrow I have Leo from PDX Leo coming on to talk about All We Can Save. He might have a thing or two to say about today's book. I probably hasn't read it, but would be interested in the topic for sure, as LGBTQ rights are being eroded here, as you pointed out. So yeah.
And that's the thin end of the wedge as well, because people don't think about this, but once that group is dealt with, inverted commas, well, then they need a new target.
Yeah.
So who's next? And then who's next
First
after that?
Came, right? First they came before. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Self-perpetuating violence in many ways.
Any final thoughts, Ben?
I mean, I just want people to think, you know what, that's all it is. My eldest is 21 now, and the amount of conversations we have where he'll say something to me and it's like, explain what you've heard. And then what he'll do is he'll pull it from one place and he'll believe what he hears. It's like, no. Have you considered A, B, C, D? Where did you get it from? Okay. They're owned by that person. Right. This is the alternative view. Look at all this and now present the alternative. And you know what? If people look at all the things and then come to the same conclusion, fine, I guess at least they've looked. At least it introduces a small element of doubt and stops that sort of zealotry to really, really develop. And that's the other thing that I want. I just want people to open their eyes and look, and then just do the little things. Not everyone is going to be marching through the streets protesting. That isn't for everyone, but the little moments day to day, if everyone does that, these issues actually can't take hold because you have this grassroots that keeps it away.
Right.
Just naturally.
Rational check to the impulse to perpetuate whatever you're hearing, right? Instead of
Yeah.
automatically turning around and spinning the same tale, you can stop, think, check in, check some facts, like, and then make your decision, right?
Yeah, and it ends like a game of telephone sometimes as well, because if one person hears one thing and then they parrot it to someone else, it gets worse as it goes further and further.
Yeah,
so then you have that as well. So, and I think that's a conversation around education, which is a very, very long conversation. Which
yes,
is not
that could be a whole month-long thing of its own. Different countries, different age levels, different subjects, different policies. Yeah. You should definitely look this up. This is her name, Francesca Ramsey. And yes, critical thinking. Need to develop that skills and pass it on. Thank you so much, Ven, for joining me for 2 great books that I had not read before, and I'm glad I have read. And thank you, everyone, for coming by. Again, sorry about the construction noise that intruded a little bit, but much appreciated, and good luck on the bingos. I want to see them coming in due by September 1st. So take care, everybody, and happy reading.
Bye, everyone.